Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Kovacs here. Mishnah Yomi is in our second day of learning Masechet Sanhedrin in Mishnah Yomi, chapter 1, Mishnayot Gimel Daled today. The Daf Yomi also began the Gemara of Sanhedrin yesterday. Baruch Hashem, we started at the same time. If you saw in the Gemara there that the entire chapter 1 of the Mishnah is actually printed on the first Daf of Sanhedrin. So that's really great news. If you started the Daf Yomi, then you're ahead in the Mishnah Yomi, and the Shirim will be a Chazara. And if you've started the Mishnah Yomi, then Baruch Hashem, you've already learned most of the first Daf of Sanhedrin. So the Mishnah and the Gemara are reinforcing each other. Actually, chapter 2 in the Gemara is also going to print all the Mishnayos on the first page of chapter 2. Chapter 3, we get back to the normal arrangement where there's one Mishnah cited in the Gemara, in the Talmud, and then a bunch of Gemara explaining that. But let's get into Mishnah 3 in Sanhedrin. Smichat Zakanim, the leaning of the elders. This typically means they're leaning on an animal if they have to bring a korban because the court itself, the Beit Din, made a mistake. They would lean on the animal. There's another pshat that Smichat Zakanim is giving rabbinical ordination because the word samach is used when Moshe leans on Yehoshua. We're going to learn that official ordination, official smicha, like they had back then, was not required to be a judge, but was needed for dine knasot, for penalty cases. Now, the Barton Nura here in the parish, he cites an amazing Rambam. Shenire lo appears to Rambam shebizman hazeh she'ein lanu samach ish mipi ish ad Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no direct chain of smicha, of rabbinical ordination, going all the way back to Moshe, but im hayu maskimim kol chachamim shel Eretz Yisrael, if all the sages in Eretz Yisrael agreed lismoch yachid rabim to give smicha to one or many, harei elu smochin v'yacholin ledon dine knasot, that they would be officially samuch and able to do penalty cases as well. Lamaisa, this happened in Tzfat. They gave rabbinical ordination to Yosef Karu, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, which worked at least according to the Rambam. But back in the Mishnah, Egla, Arifat Egla Bishlosha, the decapitation of the calf, is also with 3 judges. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, this is according to Rabbi Shimon. Remember the Egla Arufa we talked about in the end of Masechet Sota, when there is an unsolved murder. There's a whole ceremony with the calf, and part of that's to bring publicity and try to solve the murder. Rabbi Yehuda Mer B'Chamisha, Rabbi Yehuda says these things need 5. In the Gemara they learn out, it says Samchu, that's plural 2, Zikne, that's plural another 2, and we never have an even number with a Beit Din, so he rounds up to 5. Back in the Mishnah, Chalitza Miyun Bishlosha. Chalitza is the alternative to Yibam. Someone's brother died without children, God forbid. The widow needs to be taken care of, either married in Yibam or released to marry someone else with Chalitza. We talked about that in Masechet Yevamot. Miyun is, there was a marriage that was a rabbinical level marriage, and when the young girl is old enough, she is able to walk out of the marriage if she decides she doesn't want it. Now, back in Yevamot and in Kiddushin, chapter 2, we actually learned Asur la'adam she'kodesh bito k'shekatona. A man should not marry off his daughter when she is underage. He should wait till she's old enough to pick who she wants to marry. But we mentioned famously there's a Tosafot in the Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf 41, who says that's normative halacha. But in the times of the Crusades, when it was very unpredictable and you didn't know if you could get a shidduch to marry off your daughter or if something horrible, God forbid, would happen, then they would rely on the biblical power to marry off girls even at a young age for their protection, so they could actually get married and not be at the whims of the Crusaders. Similarly, we mentioned in Arab countries where the local non-Jews would abduct young women and take them away, but they would not do so if she was married, that they used to write up marriage contracts, documentation, to show this young girl was married so she would not be kidnapped by the local non-Jews. So underage marriage was never really normal. It's just for the protection of young women. It was done sometimes under very extenuating circumstances. Back in our Mishnah, Neta Revai, the 4th year produce from the orchard, the Meiser Sheni, and the second tithe, She'ein Domav Yeduin, that you can't exactly estimate the value, maybe it's getting a little rotting, Bishlosha, so you need 3 people to estimate the value. Now you need the value because you're going to redeem this produce on coins and take it to Yerushalayim. Remember in Masechet Meiser Sheni, we learned about 2.5 years ago, if you're growing watermelons, you can't bring your tithe of watermelons to Yerushalayim, at least not all of them, it's very heavy, so you would redeem them onto kesef, onto coins, and then spend those coins on food in Yerushalayim. Hahekdesha b'shlosha, and consecrating items. We also have 3 people assess the value of your donation to the temple. The archin mitaltalin b'shlosha, and anytime you're donating your erech, if you give your erech, your fixed value to the temple, and you're paying with movable objects, not with cash, they need 3 people to assess the value. Rabbi Yehuda Omer echad ben kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says one of them should be a kohen. A karkayut tisha v'kohen. If you're using land to donate to the temple, then you need 9 people to estimate the value of the land, and one of them should be a kohen. Ve'adam kayotzi behen, and also somebody's giving over his own value to the temple. You understand the value someone would pay to have his services to work for him, then you would need 9, and one of them a kohen. On to Mishnah Daled. Dinei nefashot, capital cases where a life is at stake, b'esrim v'shlosha, require 23 judges. And that's called a Sanhedrin katana. It's a small Sanhedrin. Roveya ve'nirba, and this includes somebody who lives with an animal intimately. B'esrim v'shlosha needs 23. Shenamar ve'harogta et isha ve'et behema. That if they're guilty, they execute the woman and the animal involved. And the same if there was a man involved with an animal, they also kill the animal and the people. So both require a court of 23. Shor and Niskal, an ox that murdered someone and needs to be executed with skila, with stoning, B'esrim Shlosha, needs 23. Janamar, as the pasuk says, Hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. The shore will be stoned, and also the owner will, quote-unquote, die. Kamita the bailim, kach mita the shore. Just like we need 23 to judge a person to death, so too we need 23 for the animal. And we explained in Bava Kama, I think chapter 5, Mishnah 7 or so, that really they don't execute the owner for negligently allowing his ox to get out and kill someone. He's on the hook for a penalty, for a kofar, for a financial payment, but he should feel as if he is responsible for this death and make proper atonement and compensation. On the topic of animals, the Mishnah adds hazev, the wolf, ha'ari, the lion, a dove, a bear, a namer, a leopard, a bardalus, which is a hyena or a polecat, ve'nachash, the snake, mitotan be'esrim shlosha. If they killed someone, we take them to court, a court of 23 judges, and, we give them a trial. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and this is when they're owned by a person, when they're a pet. If they're just a wild animal, they don't have any court rights. But Rabbi Eliezer Omer, kol hakodem lahargan zacha. Rabbi Eliezer says, a big shkoyach, it's great for whoever kills one of these animals on sight, shoot them on spot, if they're harming a person. Rabbi Akiva Omer, mitatan b'esrim shlosh. Rabbi Akiva says they can be put to death with a court of 23. So what's the difference? The Gemara asks between Rabbi Akiva and the first opinion is the nachash. Rabbi Akiva says you could kill a snake on sight if it poses any sort of threat. There's even a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat that even on Shabbos, if there's a snake that's poisonous or threatening, you could kill it even on Shabbos. Now, this list of wild animals might sound familiar from a few months back in Bava Kama, the first chapter of Bava Kama, Mishnah 4, Mishnah Dal. We said there is a concept of tam and muad, animals that don't normally harm, and animals after 3 times they're muad, they're warned, they're known to be causing damage. But these particular animals are always considered muad. But there in Mishnah Daled, Rabbi Eliezer says if they are b'nei tarbut, they've been domesticated and trained, they're not always considered muad. But over here in Sanhedrin, he's saying you could shoot them on spot if they're harming someone. So the difference is if an animal is causing harm and it's one of these animals that's not normally kept as a pet, but okay, maybe in Russia they train the bears, then Rabbi Eliezer would agree if it's causing harm, you should really remove the problem right away. So this might also apply to pitbulls. I think Rabbi Eliezer would probably be masking by pitbulls. And over there in Bava Kama, they do mention there's no such thing as training a snake. So there's no such thing as a pet snake in halachic terms. Yashar kochachem, good Shabbos.